Om Brahmanandam Paramasukharam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dvandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvama Shadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tan Namami. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we, through that grace, go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavo Vahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us, and may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Salutations to all here on Sunday, which is a day for us of deep study in the Dharma, or what Vedanta calls Atma Gyan, or Brahma Gyan, that highest wisdom, which is beyond secular wisdom or lower knowledge, beyond the Paravidya element of things out of India's ancient revealed scriptures and luminaries. We study that on Sunday as a sort of return to keeping that day a holiday in the Christian sense of the term. And in a sense, every day is a Sunday during this COVID virus isolation time we're going through, pandemic worldwide. We stay in each day and study the scriptures and practice our four yogas, four great yogas Vivekananda called the new religion of the age. The knowledge yoga, the devotional yoga, the meditation yoga, and the selfless service yoga, karma yoga. We practice that day to day during this time of trial. It's as if for the yogis and yoginis, no change has taken place. That's what we do every day when we're dedicated aspirants or sincere seekers of truth, is to keep ourselves in yoga, which means union. There's yoga as practice. There's also yoga as the ultimate goal, enlightenment. They really resemble the same to the person who practices consciously. Because even Shankara, whose birthday is in a couple days, I think on Tuesday the 28th, even he has said that he has to keep the mirror of the mind polished in this world. They ask him, well, you're already enlightened, and why do you have to do spiritual practices? Basically said, as an example to the world, so that they can reach the state of yoga or higher consciousness, which is a return to normalcy, as we've been talking about recently, giving up your false identity and just reassuming your true identity. As enlightenment's not a phenomena, It's as Shankara himself said, it's a state already at hand or always at hand. So he said, I do it as a practice for others. He also said he keeps the mirror of his own mind polished because he wants to see divine reality as clearly as possible while he's in the body-mind mechanism or psychophysical being. Those are two otherwise puzzling statements for the non-practitioner, or someone who thinks matter's the only reality, or someone who thinks they don't need to be observant of everything, to think about God daily. Fallen out of that, it's a habit of organized religion, but it's a preoccupation with the devotees. And it's a natural state of mind with the luminaries. You don't have to fall in or out of anything. They're in yoga all the time. And they're the ones in which Brahman sports. In keeping with the title of our series here, this is the third class of how Brahman disports Brahmapada, that one divine reality disports itself in the many. The one has become the many, and then the many reflect the one. But the one never changes, no matter what side of that coin you're looking at it from, Purusha or Prakriti, Brahman or Shakti. Or as we talked about last week, Shiva and Shakti, the oneness of these two principles of inaction and action. Peace, eternal quietude, inaction, perfection, formlessness. And then the dynamic side of things, where by some means or some way everything springs into appearances, like evolution is an appearance, change is an appearance, growth is an appearance, birth and death, appearances. That's Vivarta, which we will look at first today. And it's a key word in Vedanta, one of the first words you may find if you go to a Ramakrishna order Swami as your teacher, as I did, and many of us did here, and hear that word for the first time from the podium. Maybe one of the first Sanskrit words you heard was Vivarta. It's a false superimposition over everything. The way Vedanta likes to look at the appearances of things. Buddhism has its way and its word for that. Yoga has its way and its word for that. Tantra has its way and its word for that, as we looked at last week when we looked at how Brahman disports itself through Tantra, like through Sadakya, the 6 ways of learning about Brahman in Tantra. A powerful system. Nobody can call Tantra not well thought, just because it has a devotional aspect to it and it likes to deify the images, as my teacher used to say. Renunciation is not condemnation, it's deification. So even a Vedantist, an Advaitist, saying that gives you this idea about the tantric element and everything. So the word, or Om, which was in the beginning of all origins, it was the original origin of things, because Brahman, or reality, can't be an origin. It's non-originated, as Gaudapada said. Unoriginated, has no beginning. The one thing you can say. The word you can say is the source of all origins, because when it vibrates, which actually it's doing all the time, when consciousness separates itself out or bifurcates, it becomes aware of a vibration. When the aspirant separates itself from nature, he or she becomes aware of a vibration too. One's coming from the inside out, the other's coming from the outside in. It's a beautiful phenomena, if you want to call it that, that everything is a vibration here, and that we haven't picked up on that and called everything the word, as Gaudapada has been doing in his commentary on the Mandukya Upanishad. All is just Om. Whatever exists is just Om. Anything that seems to exist and doesn't exist, that too is just Om. It goes on and assigns that one word to everything. So that you will have a source of origin to trace yourself back to. And the series before this series was talking about Agya Chakra, the 6th chakra, or what Krishna called the Jnana Chakshu, my wisdom eye. That spoke in terms of this word, where it will manifest itself most intensely, most obviously, undeniably to the inward aspiring seeker. Maybe in the heavens you might see some light, hear some sound. You'll even do that if you're a meditator, which shows the innate oneness of everything, the immediateness of consciousness or Shakti power, is that you can leave the earth right now if you wish and still come back to the body in Jivan Mukti kind of style. If you're a Jivan Mukta, a living liberated soul. So you'll become aware of a subtler vibration and then lift off the grosser vibrations of the objects, the senses, and finally into the mind and into your intellect. Vacha niyacham purnatmani tam yacha buddhau diyam yacha cha buddhi sakshini. Shankara, whose birthday is in 2 days, says, Tam chapi purnatmani nirvikalpa. Vilapya shantim parma bhajasva. Beautiful sloka that Shankara composed. It says that vacham, everything is this word, and you connect the word to the mind, and then the mind to the intellect, and then the intellect to the ego, and then the ego to the witness. Is the game over yet? When the witness comes forth, still a little distinction between the witness and that which it's witnessing, but the detachment is mature, which it isn't in the ego. Then you dissolve the witness into Brahman, because Brahman is the soul of everything. The famous Shankara sloka, Vacham Niyacha. You do this, so you're the practitioner of sweet dissolution, he says. It's not a vicious tearing away, or, oh, I've got to fight against this, because this will just come back to me and show that it's Brahman disporting at various levels. You can't deny it outright. It's not a matter of nothing or emptiness. Nothing doesn't exist. It's a nice sloka for your t-shirt. You see, nothing doesn't exist. It comes from seeds, and the primal seed is the word. So you're dissolving everything back towards that. And finally, this practitioner of sweet dissolution dissolves everything into Brahman, because Brahman is the soul of all. And that's how the soul enjoys vilapya shantim, eternal peace, and parma bhajasvam, supreme bliss, ecstatic bliss. That's how he enjoys it. Someone in know and with direct spiritual experience about that could not help but be Brahman disporting itself then, through inferior mechanisms like the body-mind mechanism or the psychophysical being. So those terms become less strange and more friendly to you. So, oh, I see, I have to dissolve all this because it's a tattva. It's not sentient. I have to practice tattva yoga. Tattva yoga is Samkhya, you see, and in Samkhya, that's why Shankara said, Samkhya is the closest darshan in India to Advaita Vedanta. It's a direct quote from him. And so it's because you're studying the tattvas in Samkhya, you're not leaping for the throat of everything or to the crown chakra. You're going step by step and studying from outside in, like Tantra would do as well. So you're dissolving everything as you do. You're dissolving your ignorance around it. Your ignorance could be anything from gross attachment to it to not seeing it as an expression of Brahman and all the different levels in between those stages. So you mature your consciousness back to its source, the Word, by seeing that the Word has become all this. Brahman has become the 24 cosmic principles. And if a great soul like Sri Ramakrishna said that to us, then we'd probably have to look a little bit, take those statements about Maya being an absolute, or everything being a false appearance on things, with a grain of salt. Because our consciousness may change around that view as it matures. So practicing Tattva Yoga is just like discrimination. Exactly like that. You're just doing it from the opposite side. In one way, you're trying to cut it away with discrimination. The other way, you're trying to prove it through the existence of Brahman in everything, tattvas. In either way, you have to study the non-self first to get rid of it. If you can't do away with it if you don't know what it is. You can't know who you are if you don't know what I'm not. Who said that? Yes, Babaji Bob Kindler just said it, and he coined it too. You can't know who you are until you know what you're not. And that's a big mistake I think people are making, is trying to jump to Advaita Vedanta before they've taken in teachings of the Dharma that India is rife with, all the philosophies are rife with, from Samkhya to Advaita Vedanta, historically speaking, and also philosophically speaking, that all these tattvas are nothing but Brahman in expression, and that's the final dindima, or the final conclusion you come up with if you're a practitioner of Indian darshanas. All this is Brahman. How do they say that? In 10 minutes I've just told you how they say that, how they come to that conclusion. Now prove it for yourself. Be a practitioner. I'm going to give a talk on Shankara since it's his birthday in a week. It's going to be called Sadhana, Moksha, and Jivan Mukti. So you practice to get free. And then when you get free, you can decide whether or not you want to be free in the body or free outside the body. It's sort of like the teaching of the Bodhisattva in Buddhism, where you can come back after you get liberated. If you have your nirvana, you can dissolve. You've dissolved everything else, so you're going to dissolve your witness and maybe never come back. Not into the ego or psychophysical being. You could maybe stay as witness. Which is a secret, how the Swami Vivekanandas and Shankaras of the world probably stay as witness in a causal body. They won't even take on a subtle body necessarily. But they can disport, and part of their disport or their sport, either way you put it, is manifesting themselves to their devotees through various wisdom principles. And that's why I've brought up this chart, which we looked at. I'm calling it back just to show you how we started off this series 2 weeks ago, and a furtherance as far as expanding on that teaching here. So with my preamble a little shortened this weekend, hopefully gave you some inspiration to think in these terms. Get your philosophical juices going, as they say. It's not just your gastronomical ones. When you have a nice meal of sanctified food, we hope, but also a philosophical meal is there for you, which we do, not just once a week either, even when there's a threat out there, a pandemic. We're doing this daily, thinking about it daily, meditating on it daily, and meditating it beyond it daily as we dissolve it each day. Some horrific thing happens to you, or you see some horrific thing in the world, and your next morning's meditation, it's there. So you think about it, take it apart, neither attracted or averse to it, give it a few minutes, dissolve it, and it's gone. It doesn't come back anymore. A vague wisp of it, like a burnt rope, comes back on you once in a while. Oh, I saw something horrible once. But it's not in me anymore, you see. And you should do that with every little thing that ails you. And that's keeping the mirror of your mind wiped clean. Shankara did it here because he had a mind. He took on a mind. Other people don't even know they're the mind yet. They think they're the body. So you can see what a wide and vast difference there is between a knower of Brahman and a samsari. We're sorry that you're a samsari. That's somebody who believes in rounds of birth and death and ignorance, but in the Kali Yuga, this day and age, they don't even know yet that they're bound. They don't know that there's such a thing as a cycle of birth and death. That's an early teaching. Buddhism 101, Vedanta 101, Yoga 101, Samkhya 101. You have to come to find out that these things are actually cycles that are going on because the great souls told you they were. Now you find yourself one day aware of not only the waking state but the dreaming state. Jagat was the lowest form of ignorance there is. It's the seventh lowest tier of ignorance, avidya. And then as you waken up, you get swapna and you get sushupti. Even Advaita gets put in terms of that in the 101 Vedanta teachings, that you awaken slowly to your true nature. You begin to remember things that happened to you before this lifetime. You begin to make connections. Open nadis, as we were talking about, channels, very important teaching in Kundalini Yoga. So I wanted to bring forth this teaching of Vivartopadana in terms of how a lightning flash shows itself in the window pane, not in the wooden shutters. That was how I started off this series 2 weeks ago. If you can show that chart really quick, we can look at it and just refresh your mind. You see there's a window, the lightning flashing outside, and it's reflecting in the window pane, but the wooden shutters are not reflecting the lightning. So when Holy Mother said that, a flash of lightning can be seen in the window pane, but not in the wooden shutters, she was talking about you need to be this window pane, like Shankara wiping the mirror of the mind clean so it can reflect reality here as well as it can be reflected. So you're beginning to see everything as Brahman. That's your practice, to begin to see everything here as Brahman. And if you have to study the tattvas, dissolve them, or if you have to practice neti-neti, or if you have to make the penultimate goal of your practice Buddhist emptiness, shunyata, or if you want to make the word your study of the ultimate cause of things, the origin of all manifested things, at the same time you're seeing how Brahman is in all of those and shining at different levels. How so? It's Brahman itself, it becomes the word, it becomes the Trinity, the avatar comes out of the Trinity, it sports, Maya happens, all the worlds of name and form come, and the dream goes on, sankalpa. If you want to take one trajectory off of Brahman. If you want to take the other trajectory, Brahman has its Mahashakti, its dynamic power, and the Ishvara, or Ishvari form of that, the great mind, the Mahat, comes into the picture. Prakriti comes spilling out of that in 24 ways, as we just said in the tattvas. Then you come to the mind, which is a part of Prakriti. The seeds, you see, mind, ego, intellect, and thoughts. That's antahakarana, the fourfold inner cause of all things after it, which means all the akashas in space, and the dream goes on, all availed of 5 senses in dream, 5 senses in waking, 5 subtle senses or elements in dream, and 5 gross elements in waking. So the grosser tattvas get revealed and people's desire for them, vikalpa. They start turning them into all sorts of fantasies, all sorts of permutations, all sorts of admixtures. And Maya is rife at that time. People don't even know that they're in it. So bringing this back real quickly, you can see that some of the arrows pointing to these lightning flashes here are Ishvara, Ishvari. The sadhakas and the devotees are definitely an arm of that lightning flash that gets shown in the window of the mind. And Shakti herself is looking on as the great witness. Then you have the light of pure conscious awareness, the realized and illumined souls, all a part of that main blaze, flash of lightning. And the assignment pointing toward the window sill is just ordinary souls. They don't feel the light of that when there's a great flash of consciousness, like an avatar coming to earth. So they don't even know that he's come. They don't even care if he comes and if he goes, or she, because we had Holy Mother come now with Sri Ramakrishna, so even when she comes, she remains hidden. People don't see her or seek her out. So the greatest of all things, events, can happen in the world. I'm speaking spiritually, philosophically. And the window pane of collective human consciousness will not reflect it in the least. It won't budge. Thick as a brick. Dense. So you're going to have to look to certain sort of principles. So just reminding you of that, because we already took this chart 2 weeks ago, how Brahman disports itself. So you said Brahman is that great flash of lightning. How is it going to disport itself in various things? Like in the illumined soul, or the avatar, or the ordinary soul. How much of the light gets through to the ordinary soul? How much of it gets through to your senses and the 5 elements? Because the 5 elements are very attracting. They sparkle. How much of it is the tricks of prana, and how much of it is the mind's sankalpa? How much of it comes from the cosmic mind? I say, oh, there must be consciousness even in the plants. Yes, but the truth is that consciousness that's in the plants is really the consciousness of the Mahat in the plant, the great mind, because it has come out of the great mind. Trees, grasses, cows, horses. That's why we say all these animals are in you. They've come out of you as your thoughts. And there's some very powerful forces behind you. The small you and, let's put it, the great you and the small you have a lot of power. There's a lot of covering power in the small you. How much of this light can we get away from? How much can we darken the picture? Evil people would be like that. Oh, let's keep the light out. And striving people want to let that light in and open channels for it, live in it, grow by it, like plants and grasses are doing under the sun. So Vivarta then, as my lead up to this subject today, is a way in which Brahman disports itself. You'd say that I really wish I would do more spiritual practice. If you were to align that wish with Mother's will, Ichha Shakti, we call it, and pray to her, say, please allow me more time, more energy, more capacity to know Brahman through my sadhana, then you'll realize that she's giving you more and more capacity over time to realize the true nature of things. And when we say the true nature, we don't mean Mother Nature, because that's veiling the true nature of things. In a sense, Mother Nature is also kind of a revealing power, isn't it? The beauty that's there in the 5 elements has really come from the Mahat, from the great mind of God. So can you imagine how much more beautiful it is internally in the Mahat than it is out here in the individual mind, the collective mind? The light increases and beautifies everything to a much greater extent within. Like a lightning flash, it'd be like living in the land of lightning flashes. If you ever been at night in a car driving or in the forest and there's a distant range cloud and you can see lightning every few seconds, that would be like the seer living inwardly and seeing the lightning flash of wisdom every few seconds. You don't have to wait for a day. See, I'll just say to your friend, okay, I saw it over there, wait. See? So he only had to wait some 10 seconds for this beautiful flash of lightning to illumine everything, including your soul, so you can become an illumined soul. So in that way, we wanted to use this as the main teaching for how Brahman disports itself. And in this way, a teaching like Vivarta would become a revelatory tool. I think people are thinking of it more as a cutting away tool. So they're thinking, I have to cut this away, but as they cut things away to reveal a larger picture of Brahman's light, they're forgetting to remember. Don't forget to remember that those things you cut away are also expressions of Brahman. All is Brahman. For the inward moving, intrepid spiritual traveler, it becomes less and less that Brahman's real and the world is unreal. It becomes more and more that Brahman's real and the world is its reflection. It's also real. And so on this chart here, if we can go back to it, Sri Ramakrishna told us, Brahman is both within and without. From within, he creates the various states of mind. The scriptures therefore say, Brahman himself has become the 24 cosmic principles. Prakriti, nature, a great mind, ego, intellect, thoughts, the 5 subtle elements, the 5 subtle senses, the 5 gross elements, and the 5 subtle elements. All there. The 24 cosmic principles. Brahman has become all that. Therefore I say, worship Brahman both inside and out. So no one-sided person here in our master, in the great master, in the Kali avatar, with his beautiful divine consort, Holy Mother, with him to accent everything he had to say about dynamic power. And so with that in mind, please look at Vivartopadana and think of Vivarta, this word false superimposition, with less emphasis on the word false. What's false in false superimposition is your inability to cut away what's non-essential. The non-essential is not necessarily not Brahman. It's also part of Brahman, just like seeds are part of the fruit, but you never eat them, you eat the flesh. So if you want the full weight of divine reality, you have to weigh everything. The fruit, the flesh, the skin, the core, the stem. Then you get the full weight of the fruit, Sri Ramakrishna said. So in that way, what you're cutting away in this practice that they call neti, or shunyata, that renders everything free and clear. It wipes the mirror of your mind completely of all things that are not the essence. So the intrepid spiritual practitioner is going for the essence. And it has to go through with this sadhana called neti. Vivarta will then be with a less mature devotee. I got rid of that. I got rid of that. I'm not troubled by that anymore. Those things you got rid of and you were troubled by were your problem. They weren't the problem of nature, and they weren't the problem of the Mahat, and they weren't the problem of Brahman, surely. So it's a positive teaching, neti. Say not this reveals iti, all this. So follow through with it. Don't just stop at the neti and say, okay, the universe is unreal, Brahman's the only reality. Then you have to come back to the universe to help others, and you come back there as a very negative force. See? But that's not what Sri Ramakrishna was like. So his qualified non-dual position here was his preferred altitude. Vashishta Advaita, he liked that because the teachings can be transmitted through Vashishta Advaita. God can actually disport more fully in that. And so you see these dewdrops on these branches. This is one of Sri Ramakrishna's very special teachings that you don't find in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, but we heard this from Swami Damodarananda Maharaj when he was alive in the body, before he gave his body into the sacred river some years ago. And so we were sitting with him in India outside the monastery on the lawn outside Bellarmat. And he was there visiting from Australia, where he was presiding. And he said, well, there's some beautiful stories that have come to light now that Sri Ramakrishna used to say that aren't necessarily in the literature that's been put out. Massive amount of literature that's put out on the great master in a very short time since he passed from the body. And this was one of those sayings: just as the morning sun reflects its light in the many dewdrops that settle on fields and flowers at dawn, so too does the one indivisible Brahman shine its light of pure awareness through the world's many objects, such as plants, animals, and human bodies, all without losing its homogeneous nature in the least. That's very important at the end, to put that in there. You think that maybe Brahman got affected somehow by shining its light, but its light is infinite. It never gets sublated or conditioned or modified or limited or restricted in the least. Where does modification, sublation, and restriction happen? In the vehicle it's shining through. So some dewdrops are large, some are medium-sized, some are small, some are resting on blades of grass, some are on leaves of trees. There's an infinite amount of dewdrops, forms, including human bodies, that light is reflecting through. That's Brahman disporting. The light itself is pure, unconditioned. It's the form that's conditioning it, that's limiting it. So this is how you say Atman is there in everything, sentient and insentient, large and small, male or female, aware or unaware. It's there in everything, equally in quality and quantity. That's the teaching around Buddha nature too, but some beings have realized it and some beings haven't, as far as human minds go. And as far as human bodies go, some are healthy with prana flowing and some aren't. And that would be because prana got studied as one of these great tattvas that's flowing through everything, got recognized, got utilized, like Kundalini coming up the 6 centers. But that one light shines. And in fact, I think that's somewhere else. We'll take that up later. Shelley's beautiful poem that my teacher used to quote from. So with that quote, explaining pretty much the whole picture of the close-up of these leaves with dewdrops on them, just like here in this circle of Brahmapada, we'll call it, a cycle of Brahmapada. You can see here some of the great things that are shining off the sun. So there's the Brahma Jyoti, the sun actually, with all its rays, some of them great explosions shooting out hundreds of miles into space, is acting as a symbol for Brahman for us right now, lighting up everything in the internal worlds. We probably want to start with great principles, great dewdrops like Ishvara, there's one, and the Trinity, which are over here too, and also the Mahat, the great mind. Those come to mind first of great cosmic principles that have much more mass to them as far as a vehicle, and much more awareness in them as far as their ability to receive and shine the light of Brahman. The Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, coming almost first. You see, in the Shaivite way of thinking, this is like the great manifestation of the three great beings. Had so much light shining through them, so much responsibility on them to shine that light further out upon the Mahat, for instance, the cosmic mind. If we look at other dewdrops there at less subtle levels, you might say that Ishvara, Trinity, and Mahat are causal principles. They're first cause kind of level of shine. The light is most beautiful, most intense, most pure there. As that light gets dumbed down or dimmed down by the less subtle principles, then you're talking about the mind, manas, and the universes, and the ego self, ahamkara. Those are the next level or line of dewdrops. A little smaller, and remember the light is still shining through them. There's just less of it because of the mass, because of these principles being further away from the source, more far-flung from the source. In India, that teaching is Shuddha, Shuddha, and Vishuddha. So mixed and mixed purity and impurity, and then impurity, and then most pure, Vishuddha. So if that were to be placed on this chart, you'd be placing Vishuddha with purest of the pure, with principles like Ishvara or the Trinity or so forth. And the Mahat, as it comes down to mind and ego, then you've caught mixed Shuddha, Ashuddha, Shuddha they call it. So it doesn't mean purity by nature of immorality, say, that we would measure by using the words purity, but it means basically less further flung from the source of things. It can't receive the intensity of light because the vehicle is lessened, and it even becomes more pronounced, or I guess you'd say less pronounced, if you're talking about the light, in the tattvas. So you see the 24 cosmic principles that we've mentioned, the prana, and living beings. So they're more far-flung from the source still, and so they're coming in at the level of ashuddha, impure. They don't have the ability to shine that pure light as intensely as these great souls, like the Trinity, would be doing. And then if you want to fall deeper into that hierarchy, down the steps, you'd see there the 5 senses, the 5 subtle senses, or 5 subtle elements, and the 5 elements. That one light shining, all else shines. By its light, all this is made manifest, is the quote at the bottom of that chart. So that's one light shining in all these things. It's Brahman's light. It's never affected by the vehicle it visits or graces with its light, but the amount that it can be manifested is limited by the instrument itself, by the vehicle itself. So that's how Swamiji used to tell people, and you hear Atman, you are the Atman. And you say, well, you're not Atman till you realize you're Atman, and when you realize you're Atman, then you're this full light of consciousness is manifesting through illumined souls like Jivan Muktas. Whereas the other living beings are like the wooden shutters. Not much light shining in them lifetime to lifetime. But the illumined souls are always aware of this light, living on this light, striving to massage away, rub away the impositions of Maya from the mirror of the mind and keep that light shining as intensely and fully as possible. So here's another visitation to Brahman disporting in various principles or tattvas, higher tattvas, middling tattvas, and lower tattvas, if you want to put it that way. And the higher tattvas, of course, being so much toward the sentient principle of Brahman that they might as well be Brahman. And that's why we try and follow them here on earth. There's such a light shining in them, even right off their very body, out of their pores. That teaching was both in Christianity and Buddhism, that the apostles of Christ and the followers of Buddha saw a light coming off of them. This day and age, the word they're using is an aura. It's an aura. But we know in Vedanta, that via Tantra and Yoga and Vedanta, that light is shining out of the very pores of the body, and we call that ojas. It's been achieved by taking in food, purifying it with the mantra, studying the slokas, with the energy you get from food, doing sadhana, and then it turns into ojas, which turns into tejas. So this is how Brahman disports too, from something as gross as food, even physical food. It can all be sublimated. It can all be purified by the yogas you practice and sublimated and taken in and then come out as pure light. So there's a very practical, although still rather mystical, explanation for how a light shines off in a illumined soul. And they have words for it in that tradition. Ojas and tejas being the two most important. For the teacher who has attained tejas, they can actually influence other people to give up the world and take on spiritual life. So they can convince them. And that's a rare thing to see. That's why we say Swami Vivekananda is the most amazing phenomena in philosophical and spiritual life in the world that we've seen. Who else has gotten thousands of people to follow Vedanta? And of course from his great master, Sri Ramakrishna, whom 5 million are now aware of and following and looking at as this great principle of Ishvara that has come again in form of an avatar, Kali avatar, Divine Mother avatar this time. It's time for her. So that's a great amount of tejas that a soul like that brings with them. And that tejas can shine through the darkness, cut through it easily. They describe Swami Vivekananda as like a hot knife through butter. Everywhere he went, any atmosphere got immediately purged of darkness. People thinking, even high thinkers thinking negatively about certain things in the world, they would forget that as soon as Swami Vivekananda walked in the room and just be taken up with his light. Then when he went away, they'd go back usually to their darkness, you see. Formed a habit of thinking along those channels, but he would actually lift people up. He did that for so-called ordinary people in lectures, in halls filled with several hundred people. After the appearance at the Parliament of Religion, he illumined the hall just by coming out and speaking his very good English and telling everyone about the Dharma, because the West had not heard about the Dharma. They'd heard about science, lower knowledge, secular subjects, and religion to some extent, but not high philosophy and spirituality, not tattvas, not the difference between the real and the unreal. They were thinking all in terms of a mixture. Shuddha. Vishuddha was not open to them, that level of purity. Not in him, seeing it in him, or not in seeing it in themselves, and not seeing him as Brahman disporting through the universe. None of those avenues were open to them in the West in the 1800s. They're barely open to very many people now, but thanks to Brahman disporting itself as an avatar, and the messenger of the avatar, and the Divine Mother who came as the consort of the avatar, we're getting more and more light. Our dewdrops are full of light. Our dewdrops are expanding. If you're a practitioner of Vedanta today with the Great Trinity, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, and Swami Vivekananda, then you're a huge dewdrop, and there's a lot of light in you. And hopefully you're going to nourish something with it. Drop it full force on the world and your loved ones, your ancestors, and reveal the truth to them, to the greatest amount of your potential. So here's that quote from Sri Ramakrishna to finish up this easy study of a chart, but it is a quick look, but a very clear look at Vivarta. And Brahmapada, Vivartapada, don't you see the similarity? It's how, sure, the discrimination could do away with the thing, but the thing is the thing, isn't it? The thing you did away with was your own false conception of it. It revealed the real thing. So that's true of even an object. Like if you have fear of water because you drowned in a past lifetime, and then all of a sudden you face off with your fear of water, which is one of the 5 elements. It's a kind of dewdrop with light in it, and all of a sudden you master water by doing away with your fear of it. That very water that was a problem to you now becomes wonderful, beautiful, blissful. Let's go to the beach here in Hawaii and let's just jump in it. No need to be fearful anymore. So you cut away your fear or whatever was false in the thing, and that was the practice of Vivarta for you. But Upadana, you see, you saw Brahman disporting in it. Oh, I see, this is Brahman. There's nothing to fear. It reminds me of the story of Sri Ramakrishna asking the young Naren, that is Narendranath, the young Vivekananda when he was a teenager, if you were a fly and you came to rest on the edge of a bowl full of nectar, what would you do? And Swamiji said, or Narendra said, oh, I'd crane my neck out with my tongue and just take drops of the nectar with my tongue, you see, and being very careful not to fall in so I wouldn't drown. And Sri Ramakrishna laughed and he said, no, that's the ocean of nectar you're talking about. You should dive into that. That's you, that's your essence. Don't just take a little drop of it and fly away out of fear. Plunge in to your divine nature. Make the jiva one with Shiva. And you're always talking about oneness this and oneness that, and union of this and union of that, merging into this and merging into that. Try it with the ocean of nectar. So this final quote I've been edging up to here says, by Sri Ramakrishna, Brahman is qualified by the universe and its living beings. At the beginning, while following the method of not this, one has to eliminate the universe and its living beings. But as long as I consciousness remains, one cannot but feel that it is God himself who has become everything. He alone has become the 24 cosmic principles. Usually, if you heard that teacher from a person concentrating, that teaching from an acharya or a teacher concentrating on the negative side of it, the neti side of it, you would be saying, as long as I consciousness remains, you can't realize Brahman. But he's saying, as long as I consciousness remains, the devotee cannot but feel that Brahman himself has become the world. So it's not a slap on the hand cautionary teaching at that point. You're thanking your lucky stars that Mother gave you the sort of discrimination so you could cut away your own misconceptions and see it as it is. And I just said it as it is. That one sentence put all the last 20 minutes into one little thing that I wanted to communicate about Vivartapadana. It's Brahman disporting with a sword. And that's how Tantra and Yoga gather around it, and Samkhya gathers around Advaita Vedanta and makes one beautiful offering, like a bouquet of many-colored flowers, Sri Ramakrishna said. I practiced all the various religions of the world as if they were each a different colored flower with each their own fragrance. Then I gathered them all together and cut them and put them into a bouquet and offered them to the Divine Mother. So that's our great master, whom we love with all our heart, all our mind, all our soul. And the devotees are loving him by the millions today in this world. That accomplishes in a very quick time, for me anyway, the explanation of this chart on Vivartapadana put together with the lightning flash in the window pane and not in the shutter. So I'm going to flip both of these charts so we can go on. I might even break a record and get to more charts today than I ever have, if we just keep this moving. Okay, is that straight and good? And you can write me questions. These classes are to be reviewed on YouTube as they come out. We put them out as soon as the live streaming is done, we try and put these out. So I'm available to write in and have communications with these teachers. I like to share with you more and definitely answer your questions if you have them. But this is the truth serum of Vedanta in this day and age, with its backdrop of container, you might say, of Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual element behind everything. In this particular teaching, we're concentrating on the Dharma and the Atmagyan and all the knowledge of qualified non-dualism, Vishishta Dvaita, that will lead you up to and qualify you for having the experience of Advaita. Those words would be moksha and mukti and kaivalya and satori and nirvana, the sampragyata, nirvikalpa. In different darshanas and even different religions of the world, you'll have this word for this non-dual state. So where I want to go to next is one of my favorite teachings that explains this even further in the terms of Chittabhasa. So now Vivartopadana had sort of one take on it, with the discrimination there fully, the sword there out and unsheathed, and ready to cut away your own misconceptions, as I'm interpreting that. You're not cutting away things that are eternal, you're cutting away things that are illusory. That's what's in your head. See? The things themselves remain. Now, it's obvious because everything is. You can't cut it out of the picture. Nature won't allow it, Brahman won't allow it. Its very nature is existence. So with Chittabhasa, they take a little bit kinder look at it, as I was actually doing with the Vivarta teaching too, is that everything is just a reflection of Brahman in the cosmos. And as Swami Vivekananda said to us once, it was written down, as so much of what he said was, thankfully, he said, God is not in the universe. The universe is in God. So people looking at or hearing about this brief statement would think right away, before they heard the whole thing, oh, I see he's an atheist. And then afterwards, oh, he believes in God. And so they're being taken, sort of yanked in different directions without maybe missing, and while missing the point, that all of this has come out of Brahman, and Brahman is in it like it's in dewdrops, like light is in dewdrops, or like a flash of lightning is in a window pane. You're just mistaking the thing for the reality. So you have to separate the wheat from the chaff, you have to use the sword of discrimination, or you have to get a teacher to tell you about Chittabhasa. That is chit, reality. Not chit, which is thought. That can be very high too. But chid, that's like beyond all atmospheres. You've got the bhutakasha, which is the atmosphere of things. You've got the pranakasha, the atmosphere of energies. That goes both inside and out. There's an inner energy called prana, so it's pranakasha, probably where your ancestors have gathered or are gathering. And you've got chittakasha, the space of thought, and you've got jnanakasha, the space of intelligence, which hopefully you'll get a hold of and hone and get that ojas and tejas out of it I was talking about. But then you've got chiddakasha. It's sort of like, if you talk about the 7 chakras, you have to talk about 6, because the 7th isn't really a center. It's expansive. It's boundless. In the same way, you can't really talk about chiddakasha as akasha, as a space. It's boundless. So it actually is the better definition of space, which even to us is boundless out here, physical space, bhutakasha. So a quick run down the 5 akashas, because it's a very important dharmic teaching, because, well, unfortunately, everyone here on earth is in the bhutakasha is thinking just about physical things and material things and bodies, precious ores and get the money from, and nature and elements. And that's as far as it goes. They don't question where it came from, and if they do, science is going to tell him it came from time, from long cycles of time. But the real origin of it is beyond time. It's beyond space, akasha. It's beyond time, kalas, phases of time. Time will throw that confusion at you in cycles. That's why Buddha said, get off the Kala Chakra, because it's confusing you. And you're making the unreal into the real by going around the cycle. Every time you go around the cycle, you're adding another measure to the power that Maya has over you. Just like someone knitting, pearl knit and all that, the thing just grows exponentially. Knit another thing on top of that. So every time you go around a cycle of that, knitting with the mind, all these false assumptions and assigning reality to them, and when you should be assigning reality to who's doing the knitting, at least, and stop and be silent. Silence, simplicity, and solitude. I was meditating this morning, you see, and there's the shrine in front of me, and on the side's another shrine, and the books are there, the holy books. So I came out of my meditation and I opened my eyes, and one book had been taken out of the shelf and the cover was facing me, and the name of the book was that, Solitude, Simplicity, and Silence, Solitude, and Simplicity. So that was the first thing my mind saw, first words my mind read when I came out of meditation this morning. So it's a very good formula. Go into silence. That's the first doorway to yoga, according to Shankara. And then simplicity. See, the whole thing is simple. God is real, the world isn't, if you want. God is the only existence, might be a better way of putting that in terms of what we're talking about here today. And then stay in solitude, like you're having to do with this pandemic. Use solitude for the right reasons, for a deeper purpose. How about returning the meaning of life to its original status inside of you, or coming to realize the self, giving up the false identity and returning to your real identity. That would be the difference between ego and Mahat. The little personality and the grand, great mind, her personality. So Chittabhasa is another word here, very similar at different periods of India's darshanas and philosophies, that has gone through over many millennia, we say. When Swami Vivekananda says God is not in the universe, it'll stop people up. First they'll think, oh, then there's nobody here to help me. And then they'll think, if they're deeper thinkers, oh, well, that's why everything's so screwed up here. See? Because God's not here. And, or if it is here, it's here in a dewdrop somewhere that I'm not seeing. It's reflecting through forests and trees and grasses and cows and living beings, and I'm seeing more and more light as I look in the right way towards these things. Finally, I make a connection inward to my prana, which connects me to my mind in dream tonight, and I'm getting more and more light. You're doing this blissful dissolution, you see. Practicing it every day. You don't have to dissolve it as if it doesn't exist, because it comes back again. Ramakrishna was sitting at the lake with his student. Green scum over the lake. He says, watch this, and he parts the green scum with his hands, and they both look in and see their beautiful countenances, their faces shining there in the pure, fresh water, you see. And then as they watch, he starts to look away, and his master says, no, keep watching, please. And over seconds, a minute or so, this green scum gathers again over the lake, see, and covers the view of their true nature. So that's how everything continues to come back on you in Maya. Maya is eternal. Brahman's eternal, Ishvara is eternal, your Atman is eternal, nature is eternal, and oh shoot, Maya is also eternal. It's one of the 10 characteristics of the teachings of Maya, is that it's eternal. You just have to see that it's not a threat to you. It's a threat to people who don't know about it and what it is. It's not a threat to those who've seen that it's in Brahman, like poison is in a snake, and they choose to protect themselves from it. With that sadhana, that practice they're doing, that's a protection, like mantra is a protection for you. So that's just explaining God is not in the universe. But then he says the universe is in God. So he's not an atheist, is he? He's admitting that God exists and that here is this manifestation of it in everything. You're just looking at it from the wrong direction. You have to make God the reality and the universe an expression, instead of the universe is the only reality and God doesn't exist. Or hoping somehow that God is in the universe and putting all your faith in the chaff and not in the wheat. It's a common mistake that's being made by religions and by people over centuries and millennia, and they never learn. If you learn it, then you know that God's not responsible for all the horrors that are happening in the physical universe, in the Bur Loka, or the Bhutakasha. Then all of a sudden, that's half the clarity you need, right? Oh, I see, it's not God's fault at all, because God's not here. Nature is here, and it's insentient, so it doesn't really think in terms of praise and blame, or fault and non-fault. Oh, what else is here? Oh, well, there's me. There's the collective mind that's projected all of this in a dreamlike fashion, and then gets into it, forget that it projected it, and suffers. And then blames some entity that's not there for the suffering. Or, well, see, I can't do that to God. Here, I'll invent a devil, an incarnate, sentient devil, when evil's not real. I'll make it real, and I'll blame everything on it. The devil made me do it, do you see? So that all sorts of wrong thinking and wrong direction with this, rather than just a simple statement. God is not in the universe. Don't you see? The universe is in God. And right now, it's all intents and purposes, you're part of the universe because you're thinking yourself to be a body. So you're God's child. It's like one of the first moves to Bhakti 101. If you're not that interested in Jnanam 101 or Yoga 101 or Samkhya 101, 24 cosmic principles, then make yourself the son or the daughter of the Lord. That's all you need to do. Then you're in God. Anyway, some other wider commentary, this was a very beautiful quote to put side by side with the principle of Chidabhasa. Remember, Chid, this absolute awareness or consciousness, pure conscious awareness, with Abhasa, this false reckoning, this reflection of things. So the very first thing you'd see coming out the gate, as you looked back, as it were, would be Brahman itself, pure conscious awareness, absolute reality. You could look at that as Allah. You could look at that as the Almighty Father. You could look at that as Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature, Atman, Paramatman, Paramashiva. You could look at it in so many different ways. And it is what it is, whatever name you put on it. Some people don't want to name it. Some religions say, no, let's leave it nameless. Hands off. Fine. But you see, attached to it is the Mahashakti. So that's, in Chidabhasa, you have to try and add the mother into everything. It's amazing how she escaped most darshanas. Amazing that people didn't see her, or they saw her maybe as prana, or maybe a Shakti power that was dynamic but not necessarily Shaktiman, that there was Shakti but there's also a wielder of Shakti. Again, the instrument was there, the weapon was there, but nobody saw its wielder. And so they didn't give her credence or credit at all. It was just is invisible. Back to the story about Sri Ramakrishna spreading the moss from the lake. She's the one that caused him to do that, you see. Oh, here's a teaching for you. So she's always there giving a teaching. So she caused the Matri Avatar, her son, to reach out, spread the moss from the lake and tell the student to look and explain the teaching in nature to him so that he'd understand covering power, Avarana Shakti, and how it's going to be there all the time no matter what you do. So Brahman and Shakti are one, like fire in its heat, water in its wetness, snow in its whiteness. You can go on using different analogies in nature, as Sri Ramakrishna did. And so you see that's really this one eternal principle that we saw as the lightning flash in the window pane, or we saw here as the Brahman principle with its offshoots of Ishvara and Mahat and Avatar and so forth. This is where the most light collects. That would be a backwards way of saying it. It's where the light is before it gives off its rays. You'd only see it collecting as if you were moving towards it. Oh, look, there's more light, there's more light. But once you became it, you'd realize that the light had always been there and it was always boundless, boundaryless. So there's other names for it. Direct emanation of pure conscious awareness. Atman, one of our favorite words. I am the Atman. An unmanifested Prakriti comes along in that way of thinking. That's where the tattva side comes from. The sentient side is Atman and illumined souls and Ishvara. We looked at that in that circle on the window pane chart that I just showed you, how things are more and more sentient as they move away from Brahman, become mixed pure and impure, or finally impure, meaning as far away as they could possibly get, like the hells, or the phantoms in your mind, or the element earth. And then they have less and less light, and they're more confusing in that way. If you concentrate on them, on earth, or on water, or on fire and air, without trying to dissolve them back into their origins, then you stay with the five elements, and your occupation is in the five elements. Your value is in the five elements, like in gold and silver. But Swami Vivekananda told us when he was in the body, I am not a rich man, I have no gold to give you, nor do I have any silver, nor anything value. What I can give you is the meaning of the goldness of gold. I can give you the meaning of the silverness of silver. I can give you the meaning of the divinity in mankind. This is what he had to offer. So he was up and away, hands off of all those lower tattvas. They weren't going to satisfy him. He wanted to see the light in its fullness. Purnahanta, I am in fullness. We had that teaching a few weekends ago. So I'm just saying that when you get to the unmanifested Prakriti side of things, that's where the insentient principles come. That's where the seeds to everything are. The seeds that are showing up as seeds as trees, and seeds as grass, and seeds as alfalfa sprouts that you eat, and the various seeds that things come out of are in thought form back in unmanifested Prakriti. They're in abeyance, and they're infinite amount of them, and they're eternal. And there's nothing anyone can do about that except transcend it. Maybe you don't want to water those seeds if you're a person looking for spiritual emancipation, liberation from all form and all name. You'll get beyond the seeds too. As you come out of Brahman, in fact, Lord Vashishta has a beautiful teaching. They come out of Brahman, they see what's possible with the seeds of Prakriti, and they say, ho hum, Or they say, look out, I don't want that again. I'm going back to Brahman. So the realized souls come out of Brahman, see one lifetime and go back to Brahman. That's it. That's all she wrote. If they come back at all, they'll come back as an emanation. That's one way you'd say it in Buddhism, or a prophet if you want to look at Muslim religion or Judaism, or they'll come back as an incarnation or a Jivan Mukta if you want to look at Hinduism and Advaita, or as, like I said, an emanation of the Buddha in Buddhism. So then they're being born, they're having a body without being born, is the expression around that. Namrichor nashanka name jati beda pita naiva minaiva matama janma, as Shankara, whose birthday is here in 2 days, said about that. So as you come down the spectrum, if you are so able to do so, or so careless in doing so, depending on the case, what the case may be, cosmic intelligence would be the first thing out the gate. That was Vivekananda's teaching. First thing out the gate is what I like to call the intelligent particle, the Jnanamatra. Everything is particles here, but they've been gathered together by the force of prana and senses and mind to be solid things. But back in cosmic intelligence, they were these very seeds which were there in an intelligent form that gave birth to everything insentient. Right? Because you are not, God is not in the universe is in God. So everything came out of that pure conscious awareness. Its first manifestation, its first compound of consciousness, to quote Vivekananda, is intelligence. And he differs from those who think that it was will. Oh, it was will that came out first. He says, no, it's conscious particles that come out first, jnana matras. And they're so powerful when they're gathered together and concentrated and put on any given thing, that even all the way down here in time and space with the body, beings can see through them back to the source by their concentration. What center are we talking about that we just gave a 5-class series on a couple weeks ago? Is the center of consciousness, the center of concentration, the Jnana Chakshu, the wisdom eye, or the Agya Chakra. It's even beyond wisdom. It's beyond Dharma. So that's an important thing. There's a book called Jnanamatra, The Intelligent Particle, a small book which I've written that gives you the skinny on all of that from the tradition of Vedanta and yoga. Because that was an expression used in Tantra too, far, far back. Jnanamatra. Very beautiful. That's the way they thought. So Atman and unmanifested Prakriti put side by side. This is where things would go off in their own tangent. It's all in the universe of all. The universes are all in Brahman. Brahman's not in the universes. So you'd have to put that as your basic rule of thumb if you were taking a form in any of the lower worlds or associating yourself with any of the tattvas. You should never identify with them, but you can associate with them. This is how you would think about it if you had a ripe ego and you were taking on the antakarana, or body-mind mechanism, if that were your mission, driven by the Shakti, Divine Mother, to do such things, to help all sentient beings, as the expression is. So cosmic intelligence would be what is used there, and you can see it shining its rays down and becoming what next is called the main word in this chart, Chittabhasa. It's reflected consciousness. So just like the dewdrop that we were looking at, and just like the flash of lightning in the window pane, and then in the shutters, and what a variance there is between the intensity of the light of cosmic principles, cosmic intelligence there, it'll come off as reflected consciousness, and people will look at it and get fooled. remember, it's beginning to manifest itself in tattvas, in insentient principles. So this is where Vedanta steps in with its saying, Brahman Satya Jagat Mithya. Remember, Brahman is the reality, and the worlds of name and form and time and space are false. They're reflections, or abhasa, you see, or vivarta, you see. They're false superimpositions over the reality. As long as you know that, you're safe in it, Gaudapada says. As long as you know about these two principles, you can even enjoy both and remain free of the risks of having anything to do with insentient principles that fool so many other people into thinking that the world is real, that their body is real, that their one lifetime alone is real. So as I said earlier, they're not even thinking in terms of many lifetimes or being on a cycle. Everything here is in a cycle. The planets are all revolving around the sun. That's a cycle, and you don't think that you're in a cycle too. It's so amazing that people can't waken up to this. Even intelligent people can't waken up to this and find themselves in Maya and then get free of Maya. Because it's not Maya that's in you. You are in Maya. So be rid of it. Quote unquote. That's what Vivekananda told us when he came here. They had heard about Maya. They were scared of it. So teachings like this set them off against Maya, you see. They could pit themselves against it, like Sri Ramakrishna saying, back off from it. Don't study it close up. You've been too close to it. You can't see that you're in a cycle. Cycles of time are in Maya. They're called kalas. They're one of the higher tattvas. So the mind itself is in the cycle and is trying to think itself out of the cycle by being the mind which is in a cycle. So it's not going to work. You see? It has to think higher than itself. You have to talk about think yourself out of a wet paper bag, or think yourself out of the box. This is out of many boxes. There's at least 24 boxes there you're going to have to think beyond. They're called tattvas. And until you know them and disidentify yourself from them consciously, you're still wrapped up in them. And the further the cycle of time goes in yugas, like the Kali Yuga, the denser people become about it. The thicker the walls of the box become. So then actually it is kind of hard for them to get out of it. When it should be a matter of silence, simplicity, and solitude. Whichever way comes first for you. And so Avatar comes, and I've been talking a lot about Vivekananda Swamiji and how the great messenger. And I've heard it said by great beings in the world today that if Sri Ramakrishna hadn't have come, Vivekananda could have stepped in as the avatar. It was that great a being. He himself could have been the avatar. And he took on the station of this most humble and perfect disciple. His parents named him Narendranath, the Lord of Men, so he was already, even by name, ready to step in and give us a teaching like that. Oh, you've got problems? You think God is here? No, God's not here in the world. The world is in God. Try thinking that way for a while. Turn Maya back in on itself. Or as Sri Ramakrishna said, the key to this lock turns in the opposite direction. It's a beautiful teaching that our founder, Lexiksen, used to talk about. The key to this lock, that is this lock of Maya here in this world, that opens the door to spirituality, turns in the opposite direction. So people are turning it in the direction they think should unlock the secret, but it's just back into the cycle of Maya. If they say, oh, let's turn it the opposite way, revelation. God's not in the universe. The universe is in God. So that's why we'd sing to him about being this perfect soul. Chandala Ratita Tarayo Yasya Prema
pravaho lokatito pyana jaho lokakalyana margam trilokepya pratima mahima jnana ki prana ando bhaktya jnanam vritta varavapu sitaya yohi brahma Naradeva Deva Jaya Jaya Naradeva 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 Naradeva Deva Jaya Jaya Naradeva,
in which he sings, and we should end here the first half of our class by saying, Sita's beloved has come again, that one whose knowledge remains ever perfect and whose selfless love embraces even the outcast, shunned by society, those smaller dewdrops in which that same light is shining. Throughout the three worlds there is no equal to this incomparable one, for he is the supreme being whose presence alone saves and benefits the world. Therefore, Naradeva Deva Jaya Jaya Naradeva, we send and offer our eternal salutations to mankind, to God and mankind. Naradeva, Swami Vivekananda, whose teachings, like Shankara's, whose birthdays in 2 days, are so much at the forefront of true religion today, and who will benefit us in the utmost degree if we place our consciousness upon him and hear the Dharma teachings in this new dispensation way from Sri Ramakrishna. So here, let's take our break and come back in 15 minutes.